The illusion of self hides this that's already perfection. It's already perfect as it is. And this can't be understood. This isn't to be accepted. And this isn't a perfection that's in opposites. Like everything that arises, no matter what it looks like, feels like, is interpreted as whatever judgment there is on it or opinion. In a way that's all made up. Everything that's arising is already perfection. So the sense of self, in a way, can't help but feel imperfect, not valid, not enough. It feels like it is lacking something. And so naturally, it would try to find something to complete itself. Whether that be a lover and more money, a house, and when it gets it, not that it ever really has anything, but when it feels like it gets it, there can be a sense of arresting of that seeking energy, of that feeling of lack momentarily. And it might feel really blissful or joyful. There might be a sense of completion. But it never lasts. And inevitably, there will be a sense of this still doesn't feel like it. Still feels like something is missing. Something's lacking. I'm still not good enough. My life isn't perfect yet. And it can feel really painful when you have something. Maybe there's a fear of losing it. And when you lose something, you feel like it means something about you. The you that isn't there, isn't real. But it can feel like a real loss for you. And so there's an understanding that it can feel really painful because when that sense is there and the stories are its reality, like my reality is the only reality, then it's really difficult to not get completely consumed by your own narrative because it feels very real. It feels like truth. And so when there is a clear seeing that there's no one here, no one at the center of anything, no one in charge of thoughts and feelings and actions, no one has a life, then all of it, no matter what it is, there's just a perfection in everything. Everything is already perfect. There's a sense of completion just as it is. And stories and judgments and opinions can still arise, but they're not seen as truth. They're seen as an appearance. And that doesn't mean that actions and words can't be done and said based on those stories, opinions, judgments, whatever it might be. Life continues for no one. Choices are made. So there might be a kind of confusing sort of transitional period where the body seems to respond in a different way. It might act a bit more different. Because from which it's functioning has completely shifted. It's no longer this false or illusory sense of self that's dictating what it wants based on wanting its own completion in some way. Like that dissolves. So now it's just life living. It's this pure perfection, and everything is arising for no one. There is no one experiencing anything anymore. There's no one that has anything anymore. There's no one that can lose anything anymore. It's all just happenings, and there's no projection of what this means about me. Nothing defines a me anymore. Nothing says anything about me anymore. And there is more of a freedom to what is. And a freedom for whatever reaction or response or emotion to freely come and go. Because it doesn't mean anything about anyone. And this isn't to be mimicked or it really can't be applied because it's just a description of what can happen when a spontaneous seeing that there's never been a self seems to happen. And there is no way to that seeing. And sometimes when that's heard, there can be a lot of misinterpretations, which is fine if that's happening. But then there might be a sense of not feeling like you can't do anything. But there's already no self there. Doing happens. There's nothing wrong with that. And what's seen is like there are natural biological needs. There's still this subtle or gentle movement toward what feels good. And not wanting that which feels painful. But it's not this obsessive push and pull. It's not this, there is no angst behind it anymore. There is no worry or need to control that anymore. It seems like a natural movement, and the body's just doing it. And that was happening all along, but this illusory sense of self that owned everything, all of the desires and fears of the body, and amplified it through its own narrative and story and beliefs or whatever it might be, then the push and pull can be really amplified and it can feel more painful because life can't be controlled. It can never be perfect. One thing can never be held on to forever. There is no security for that sense of self that feels like it has control of life and that it can manipulate life. It might actually appear like that's possible. Like so-called manifestation can appear to happen if there's this sense that maybe if I focus all of my attention on this, then it will come about. And it might happen, it might not. But already no one's behind that. So yeah, it doesn't mean that things can't happen to make the body feel better. Like sometimes when there seems to be this sense of a me and the story feels really real. Sometimes it can feel nice and relaxing for the body to bring the attention into the feeling rather than just being in the thoughts and circulating the same story over and over, trying to figure something out. Because not all of the time, but some of the time when the attention is put in the actual discomfort in the body, it can dissolve the thoughts to a certain extent. And there can seem to be some clarity that can come from that. Maybe a releasing happens, crying, or some sort of expression can happen. But that's not leading to the clear seeing of no self. No one is doing that already. That's just a technique used to alleviate the body. Just like meditation, just like therapy. And that does not determine whether there is a clear seeing or not. It can happen regardless, whenever, however. It's unknown, like everything. So for here, it seemed like after there was a clear seeing, there was a good amount of seeming processing of all sorts of different stuff. Trauma, issues with self-worth, difficulty in discerning what's right and wrong, good and bad. Like all of these different things were able to arise within this boundlessness, within this perfection that was seen. And the seeming patterns of this body kind of seem to be able to purge and be processed a bit more quickly. But that didn't mean that it wasn't painful, and there were things that for here wanted to be worked through in order for the body to really relax more into this. And it's not like there was an obviousness that no one was here doing anything. But there was a deepening in clarity that really everything was automatically happening. That really there was no problem in anything. That really there was no problem with this body and all the trauma it had. And there was an ability to see more clearly exactly why the body was programmed this way. And there was like a seeing of all the conditions here. as if it was a conditioning of another body. It was so impersonal. It didn't mean anything to anyone. Not that the body couldn't be triggered and it couldn't feel uncomfortable, but there was a seeing of all of it with such neutrality in a way, and it wasn't seen as a problem. All the imperfections, all the ways that there was self-sabotaging, all the ways that things were suppressed and denied and didn't want to be looked at because it was too painful for the illusory self, because it was identified with it. And so it buried it. Like all of that was able to come up and be seen. So all of the so-called goodness and the darkness was all seen in neutrality. And there was a wanting here to process that stuff. A wanting here to live a good life, even though no one was living it. A wanting to have fun now and just see what could be expressed here. And there's no heaviness to it. There's no real agenda. Like a relative maybe agenda can arise, but it really doesn't have much meaning to it. It doesn't stick to anything. It doesn't validate or gratify a sense of self. It just arises and then it's not held on to. It doesn't stick to anything. So it really feels like there's just this. There is absolutely no time, no future. Future projections can't really happen. Why would it happen? What would be the sense that would need to project into the future to have a sense of hope or certainty or security, a false sense of security? So that doesn't seem to happen. And memories of the past can arise and stories can still be told, and it's not a problem. Listening to other people's stories is not a problem. There's nothing wrong with anything. There's actually more of just a beauty to it, an allowing or accepting of it, and no one is doing that. There is just this absolute. It's just what is. It's not even an acceptance of what is. It's just what is. Everything that's arising. Everything is seen as perfection. Even suffering. Even immense pain. It's not seen really as good or bad. That doesn't mean that there won't be a movement to do or say something. That doesn't mean that there isn't this understanding that it can feel really real and it can feel really horrible. But ultimately, it's not seen as a problem. All of it is this pure perfection. It's not in opposites. It's not understandable. It's not acceptable for the self. It just is, regardless of what's arising. So it's really understandable that the sense of self, there can be such a burden to that sense because it feels like it's living life. It's in charge of its own life. It's in charge of everything that the body does, every decision that's made. It judges what it does as good and bad and right and wrong, and I need to make the right decision, or else I'm going to feel guilty, or it's my doing. And life feels really effortful, it can feel really burdensome or heavy. I'm not saying that heaviness can't arise or a sense of burden can't arise here. It can, but it's not seen as my burden. And it seems like the body just naturally gravitates toward what feels a bit better. And so things seem to be able to so-called resolve. Nothing's taken personally. It's almost really it's rational and logical, but it's not coming from just a mental knowing. It's actually coming from this vast unknown, this perfection, and the functioning of the brain. Functional thoughts arise, and then action is taken, words are spoken, and it's coming from this absolute unknowing of everything. It's not coming from a sense that feels like it knows what's right and wrong. So maybe that's what you can call this kind of effortless effort that happens. So it's really this pure nothingness, this absolute emptiness. That's living and expressing. This body is fully alive. There's no one in it. There's no one in charge of it. There's no one in control of it. It's living and breathing on its own. It's functioning on its own. So I would say, hear this energetically. This isn't for the person to hear and to say, then I can't do anything. No, it's saying that you're not there already, and the body is just functioning. The body is just an appearance. The body is totally empty, full of life. No one is controlling anything. There is no right or wrong choice or decision. There is no imperfection. If so-called imperfection arises, it's absolutely perfect. this isn't a knowing. It's just what's clear.